Kasumi Miku, I think, has one of the most interesting A1 in the game. Not only does it change how you play using her and your DPS and your team, it's also very strange in that it's not the best or it's not good for every single team. It's really strange. In this video, I'll try my best to explain why that is, as well as providing you with information on how good the A1 is, as well as the A2, which I'll talk about in this video. I'll also talk about how to use the A1 as well, because A1 Miku is definitely not easy to use. It's even more difficult to use than A0. I think we can begin by looking at what the A1 actually is. So A1 gives Miku skill unification, so all her skills are buff more. And then when you use her skill 3, all the highlight cooldowns will be set. And during the concert, so during the 2 extra turns, your highlight and TAG will do 10% more damage and will double the charge rate. This sounds pretty good overall, but in testing, is it actually? So I'll just show you the numbers right now, and I'll be talking about each of them individually. And starting off with the weapon or A1, which one should you pick? I'm not really going to talk about this too much because it really depends on your DPS. You see that the numbers are not consistent at all. We have something like 20% here, we have 10%, and then we have some very low numbers as well. So it's really inconsistent and really depends on DPS and your team and your personas, everything. So it's really complicated. And there's no like real pattern to this. Okay, maybe there's maybe a couple, but we'll get into that. Yeah, I guess just pick whichever you want, I guess. I will just pick the 5-star weapon if you don't care about rotations, really. Because A1 Miku is even more difficult to use than A0 Miku. And you also need to plan your rotations well. You cannot just pull the A1 and expect to do more damage. That's not how it works. You need to know how to align your skills, your rotations, your highlights, everything to make it work. So it's a high skill A1. So we're just gonna skip the A0 A1, but yeah, here's the score if you want to compare. We're just gonna jump straight comparing A0 and A1, which is this row. Again, you'll see that the numbers are not consistent at all because it depends on DPS. So let's go for the first one. Devour Dreams Bao Zebu, which is Makoto Yuki. So this is the rotation for A1. When you compare A1 and A0, there's quite a difference really. The biggest difference is the highlight rotation. Notice that I use Fire Ice highlight here and then another Fire Ice highlight here. I can do this because the skill 3 from Miku resets the highlight cooldown. This is really nice because it means that for the last 4 turns, which is the entire weakened turn by the way, you have the Fire Ice highlight active. Very strong stuff. And not just that, DRG. DRG charges twice the rate. So you can use 3 DRGs in those 4 turns as opposed to A0, which you can only use 2 DRGs. That is why Makoto Yuki is really good with A1 Miku. As you can see from the numbers, almost 27, which is the highest among all of them. So A1 Miku is a huge upgrade for Makoto Yuki team. And this hit becomes very strong. Actually kind of similar to Anj, because this Q3 we have both the full moon stacks. Anj can also give like 2 full moon stacks and stuff. So during the concert turn, Makoto Yuki can charge in 2 turns. So I can use DRG here, a Cadenza to buff, then other DRG here to damage. And then for highlight also charges twice the rate. Typically, highlight charges in 6 actions. During concert, it charges in 3 actions. So starting here, 1, 2, 3. So I can highlight here again. Then 1, 2, 3. Another highlight. As for the other rotation, I think it's about the same as A0, which I also showed in the last video. So nothing, or is it the same? Hold on, let me check. Oh, actually it's slightly different. Then we have Tempest Wind. That's why this highlight, this hit does a lot. We got Fire Ice highlight, Nian highlight, Tempest Wind highlight. We have all the crit buff, got defense debuff, got Zhao Gonggen crit damage buff. We got Cadenza. So this did so much, 7 million. Well, I guess 8 million because A1 R0, which is what we're talking about. So yes, A1 Miku very good with Makoto Yuki. Next up we have Kasumi. Kasumi 12.5, also not too bad. So Kasumi, I can use a lot of highlights. You can see a lot of yellow color, and that's because of Cord also, because Cord also charges faster, and my Cord is also A6. So I get a lot of value from highlights here. So the way I use the Miku here is Cord highlight. And Core highlight here, which lasts these 2 turns. Core highlight here, lasts these 2 turns. And that's important because Kasumi highlights here and here. And this shot, I think I explained in the last video also, the Shausa highlight, I think I use it here for A0, but I use it here because I Shausa highlight Shausa skill a bit later. Because if I Shausa highlight before the break, it's gonna break the boss too soon. But I still need to use the highlights here in order to charge the Shausa for the defense debuff. And I think that's about it for Kasumi, nothing much. Just more highlights, you can squeeze all the highlights here. You can see I squeeze Cord highlight, Shausa highlight, Fire Ice highlight for this turn. You will see that it did 4 million. In the final turn it did 3.6, 3.3 million. But that's some nice damage. And also A1 Miku also buffs highlight damage by 10%, so that's something. Next up we have Akihiko team. This one also very strong, the second highest here, 20%. The reason is actually because of DRG. And honestly, I think A1 Miku is really good with DRG characters because DRG also double the charge rate, right? So I Miku here, skill 3. You can see that I use a Yolanga highlight and a turbo highlight here. The turbo extra action actually helps with the highlight charge as well. So this turn it does a lot of damage. See, almost 9 million. He has Yolanga, he has turbo highlight, and the final skill 3 did 8.7, which is still pretty good. And on this last turn I can also stack a bunch of stuff. We have the Yolanga highlight, which lasts until the end. Then we have the crit rate buff, crit damage buff from Terrorizer still lasts until the end. And the funny thing is the Yukari TRG, because Yukari TRG usually charges in 2 actions or 2 turns, but since you double the charge rate, it means that on both skill 3 turns you can use like 3 in a row, which is quite funny. And one more thing, with Miku and the Yukari, you can TRG a 3rd time here. So there's 1, 2, 3 TRGs. So that's also one of the reasons why Akiko is very good with Miku and Yukari for the extra TRG hit, which boosts the over damage a lot. Next up, well, I guess the next 3 is where things get interesting, because it went from 12%, 20%, 20+% to like 5%, 9%. So what exactly happened here? Well, let's talk about them. First one is a Firecracker Rin team. So the funny thing is, Miku generally is better for 210 DPS. Not all 210 DPS, but generally for like the most basic, simple to use 210 DPS, Miku is better. However, I found that for those same DPS, A1 kinda suck for them. The reason is because the damage is very diluted. There's like 4 hits of the melee attack from Firecracker Rin, and one of them landed on the Miku skill 3, the concert turn. And that hit, while the highest so far of all of them, 6 million, but your other skill 3, your other melee attack, 6 million, 5 million, 4 million is still pretty high. So buffing 1 out of 4 attacks is not that strong compared to buffing like just now I showed the Agihiko team, right? Where it buffs like technically 1 out of 2 skill 3, right? It's more impactful for those DPS. For 2-turn, like basic 2-turn DPS, they struggle with A1 Miku. Increase in over damage, not a lot. But yeah, as for the rotation itself, I use Fire Ice highlight here again. Similar to the Kasumi team, it will last these 4 turns. Yamato highlight here, which will last until the end. And that's about it, nothing much to talk about here. Rotation, I talked about it already. Maragi and Nien, I'm not going to explain again why I did that. A1 Miku mostly changes your highlight rotation, occasionally your regular skill rotation as well. Next up is Frostgale Mont. This one also very low. Similar reason as the Firecracker Rin. She does 4 hits in 8 turns, 4 follow-up attacks in 8 turns, so damage becomes diluted overall. So the A1 doesn't really synergize as well. As for rotation, I Fire Ice highlight here and then here, so it lasts for these 4 turns. And first when highlight will buff this, then Frostgale Mont highlight to get the extra stack thing for the whole attack. And that's about it, just highlight changes. Then I can do another Fire Ice highlight here because it's after 4 actions. So there's like 3 Fire Ice highlight, which is pretty cool. But sadly, the overall damage doesn't really increase much. You can also compare with like A0 for example. A0 you can see that this did 3 million, 2.6, 3 and 2.6. This one did 3.5, 2.7. So really the only increase you get is like during these 2 turns. You see that 1.4, 800, 3.5. 1.4, 800, 3.5. So it's a little bit increase. And it's only for that turn. When you compare it to other turns, you can see that turn 2 is 1.7, turn 2 over 1.7 also. So you really only get buffed during the Miku skill 3, which doesn't really synergize well with 2-turn DPS because the damage is diluted across the 8 turns. And finally, we have Vishnu with the Haru team. This one is 8.9, a bit higher than these two, but still not as high as I was hoping for. I was expecting this to be much higher because of the gun, but I don't know why. It could be because of it being off type, because you know I don't use the weakness skill. I use damage percent instead for Miku. That could be one of the reasons, but I find it a little bit sad. It's only a little bit stronger. It's like 6.1, this is 61 million and 66. We have for rotation. Rotation is actually very, very interesting. When you use a Shiva here, it lasts until the end, or at least it lasts until here, and you can Shiva again. The rotation is actually quite different from A0. You can see that A0 I use gun on turn 3, 6, 8. This one is turn 5 and 8. I completely skip a gun actually. The reason I didn't use a gun is because I think the gun will do less damage than just a skill 1. So that's why I skip the gun. And I also purposely delay the Haru highlight to this turn so that I can get the buff, the highlight gun buff from on this turn, on turn 5. And then I can gun again here. So these 2 gun will have the buff. I did try like just copying A0 rotation. I think it got me very slightly less, 1 million less I guess. Not super significant, but yeah. And Shiva highlight will last until the end. The Dionysus highlight to buff, I guess, then Fire Ice highlight. But the important thing is Fire Ice highlight on both the gun turns. Yeah, I think Haru might have the most different A0 and A1 rotation, but I think all of them are quite different generally. A1 Miku, again, if you choose to pick it, you need to try to optimize things if you really want to make good use of A1. Because again, you cannot just expect good damage just because you're A1 and then you just randomly click stuff. Like for example, I can just give you an example here. This one is the Firecracker Rin. So the reason why this rotation failed is that I don't have the Matoi highlight. You see that it's missing. So I'll show you an example here. You see my A1, this one A1, not A1 as well. A1 is only 214. Then this one is 236. That's quite a difference actually. And the reason why this rotation failed is because on this skill 3, on this attack, melee attack, I only have 5X highlight. I did 5.4. You want the correct rotation did 6.1. That's quite an increase actually. The reason is because of Matoi highlight mostly, because you can debuff and then this will do more damage. For the third rotation, Matoi highlight was all the way up here, don't have the debuff. And the A1 is even worse than the A0, R0. So yeah, rotations matter when you put in the A1. Now we can move on to the A2. The A2 will grant all the effects from skill 1, skill 2 for 2 turns. And then during the concert, all your damage will have 8% more final damage. Sounds really good, but I'm sure you already saw the numbers. It's really not that impressive. Somehow the Haru was 2.4% only. That's actually very surprising to me. I don't really know why it's this low. Yeah, it's overall not that strong, really. The reason is quite simple. So let me explain. First sentence, it grants all the effects. Sounds strong, but really, the only effect that you're really getting is the damage buff, which is the Spring Storm skill 1. Yes. You're assuming you already kept crit, then the crit buff isn't really useful anymore. So damage buff is the only thing you get from the A2. If the crit is not capped, then it becomes a bit more valuable because he buffs the crit. Then there is also the 8% final damage increase to all your party during the 2 concert turns. And the problem with this is that it only applies to the concert turns. Even this buff also, like the damage buff I talked about, also only applies to those 2 turns. And that is only 2 turns out of 8 turns. So the only time A2 will be very valuable is when the DPS does most of the damage during those 2 turns. And only those 2 turns. So the more concentrated your damage is during those 2 turns, the better the A2 will be. And unfortunately for all the testing I've done, not really that impressive. And theoretically Haru should be higher here, but I don't know why it's only 2.4, it's really low. And then somehow Akihiko is also lower than Firecracker Rin. But I would say the A2 rotations are not the best, because I just copied from A1. I just did the same rotation as A1, then just use A2 Miku. Not really the best or most optimized way, because I can actually just change this to like Tarukaja for example, because I get crit rate right from this for these 2 turns, so I can actually remove like this Rebellion and make it Tarukaja for example, and that will buff the damage a little bit. Not much, Tarukaja isn't really that strong, but yeah, just to optimize a bit more. So that's my bet. I noticed it's a bit too late and I don't want to redo everything again. An example here is maybe this Vishnu rotation. Maybe I can change this to Tarukaja, then I can just change this to Rebellion. So just swap these 2, just very minor change for A2 Miku to buff the damage a bit more for these two attacks. Yeah, just very minor stuff that can improve. Most of this should increase a little bit more, maybe at most just 1% more, which isn't a lot. So yeah, A2 is just mostly for damage. If you want to go for it, sure, but I wouldn't really stress about it because it's really not crazy. So the final verdict, A1, A2, should you go for them? Honestly, there's no need. A0, R0 is fine. If you're someone who wants to score higher, someone who likes to make rotations, I recommend getting A1. Actually, I got A1 myself for, more damage, better rotations, and mostly for my guild also, because I make rotations for my guild, and it will be easier for my guild mates to follow because all of them has A1 and above Miku. A1, A2 not needed. You only get them if you want or you care about score.